welcome everybody to this Elemental Talks on the secret to keeping your water supply safe. I'm joined this afternoon by an excellent panel to discuss this important theme. I'm Tom Reynolds, Chief Executive for the Bathroom Manufacturers Association, and if I could firstly ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves in their own words. So if I can start with you, Jonathan.
Okay, hello everyone. So I'm Jonathan Price, and I've been in the test and certification industry for 20 years. My position now is Business Development Manager with Kiwa Water Tech.
Thanks, Jonathan. Craig.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Craig Holmes. I've been in the industry now for 7 years. I'm the Design and HSEQ Manager for Dart Valley Systems.
Thank you. Alexander.
Hi there, yeah, I'm Alex Hislop. I'm the Head of Product for Myra Showers. Myra, a manufacturer of showering and bathroom products in the UK. It's a market leader for showering and involved in various other product areas of the UK as well. And actually this year we're 100 years old, still going strong.
Hopefully we'll be able to celebrate it too, Alex.
Yeah, hopefully.
Siggy.
Yeah, hi, my name's Siggy. I'm the MD of a company called Bathroom Engineering. We're part of a German multinational called TC. In the UK, it's called Techie. We manufacture systems and we get involved in also showering products as well. Thankfully, it's all right, Alex, we're not a competitor, don't worry. So we get involved in those products, and I've been in this industry. Well, it's a very long story. My old man was technical director at Grower in the 70s, so I've kind of grown up in the industry, to be fair. But we've been in the UK operating about 5 or 6 years now properly. So yeah, it's a great industry. I must admit, it's great.
Thanks, Siggy. Andy.
Good afternoon. My name's Andy McLean. I'm the Technical Director at the Bathroom Manufacturers Association in the UK. My background is quite varied. I've been in and around the industry now for nearly 30 years, over 30 years now, and various technical roles, product development, etc. Through those years, and happy to be here.
Thanks, Andy. Stephanie.
Hi, good afternoon. Stephanie Allchurch. I'm a Product Development Manager for Old Technic. I've been in the industry just under 20 years now, and we cover everything from just general plumbing and heating controls.
Fabulous, thank you. And last but very definitely not least, David.
Yeah, afternoon all. My name is David J. I'm the Kiwa UK Business Unit Manager for Water. Been in the testing and certification business for more than 30 years now, the last 17 of them setting and establishing Kiwa in the UK. So
we've got a panel with packed full of credentials there, so very well qualified to talk about this interesting but oftentimes kind of complex issue. So I'm going to start off really by posing a question to our audience, and that's an audience of specifiers, of installers and various different actors in the construction market. And basically I want to ask you, what are your clients and your contractors and the other partners that you're working with asking you about the water regulations? So that's something I'd really like to throw back to our panel to reflect on. So please use the meeting chat and the Q&A functions to feed us back your thoughts on that question. Also, any other questions that you have for our panel through this conversation. We hopefully we'll get to as many of those questions as we can. But to start off with, let's really kind of enter this at a basic level. What are the water supply, water fittings regulations? And I'm going to start with my colleague Andy on that one. Andy.
Yeah, the water supply, water fittings regulations have been in place since 2000, actually, since 1999. And they protect the water supply, and they are the regulations that actually provide guide for protecting the water supply and making sure that fittings are fit for purpose, and when they're installed they actually do the job that they have been designed to do.
And regulation 4 is often the regulation that's pulled out. What's so special about that particular part of the regulations?
That specifically, we talk about regulation 4, and there's actually 41A, 41B. 41A means that the product should be fit for the purpose that it's been designed for, and the second part of that is that when installed it will actually do the job that it's been designed to do as well. So it's got to be installed correctly, and it's got to be functionally, technically adequate for the job that it's designed to do.
Stephanie, I know Alltechnic kind of live and breathe the water regulations and compliance agenda. Why are these regulations so important?
It's it just allows us to show and provide assurance to our customers that the products are, going back to what Andy said, really, you know, fit for purpose, and upon install are going to do the job that they're designed to do. You know, really for a manufacturer, it's a way that you can gain that third party sort of accreditation and testing. So your customer can be assured that, you know, the materials that you're using are going to be suitable, and that at the end of the day, the product that they install is not going to be harmful to the water supply in any way.
And I suppose that leads us to an interesting point. If products don't comply, they're not fit for purpose, not compliant with these particular regulations, what are the consequences? Craig or Alex, perhaps I can ask one of you two to comment on when things don't comply. What are the risks?
I'll jump into that if you want. Well, the risks are, I suppose, that if the development site is inspected, you know, they may have to remove them, which you know, the contractor may have to remove them, which would be very expensive and disruptive and slow down the build. But I think also, if an inappropriate product is installed, and then, you know, if it's a household and someone moves into the house, etc., then the product may not perform as it was intended. So the user will actually get a lesser experience, or potentially it could even be unsafe. And I think that's obviously a critical issue. And from a specifier's point of view, it's you know, it can be an issue around liability as well. So I think certainly from our experience in manufacturing products like electric showers and so on as well, you know, when those products are installed inappropriately and incorrectly, you know, there can be issues of safety in there as well as just performance. So it is an absolutely critical thing that people understand and follow accordingly.
Craig, do you want to add to that?
No, I'd agree wholeheartedly with Alex on that one, because if things aren't regulated and substandard product is put out onto the market, it poses a threat to those that tend to use them, both in the pocket in terms of monetary threats and also to safety. And
this is something we have to be vigilant about, isn't it? Because there is too much product available out there in some of the murkier parts of the supply chain, which really shouldn't be there, and that isn't compliant. So, you know, as a group of responsible manufacturers, as specifiers, as installers, we do need to be vigilant about the compliance agenda. David, how can installers and specifiers be sure that a fitting complies?
Well, it's a visual thing. What manufacturers should be looking for is to submit their products for a series of tests to make sure the product complies, and then enter into certification agreements with providers of certification services like Hewer. It's a visual thing, because we now have our Kiwi UK Reg 4 certification mark, which clearly is there to demonstrate that the product will comply with Regulation 41A, and therefore there can be comfort in the eyes of the user, the installer in particular, and the specifier, that if a product does have a certificate with the Kiwi UK Reg 4 mark on it, it'll comply. And then we have a good interaction with the water suppliers so that they are aware of the products which are installed, and it's a comfort for everyone.
Jonathan, do you want to add anything on that point?
What was that, sorry?
Do you want any to add anything to David's comments there about the Kiwa scheme?
Yeah, I think David touched on most of the points, but as he said, like I said, our scheme is relatively new. We are doing a sort of lot of marketing and sort of education of different sources for more visibility of the Kiwi UK Reg 4. I think we're certainly making some ground on it now. And some the customers that we are working with, they are certainly really seeing the advantages of our schemes over the alternatives. And yeah, it's as David said, it's having that Kiwa mark gives you that confidence that the manufacturer's product is compliant with Regulation 4.
Thanks, Jonathan. In the interest of balance, you mentioned that there's some alternative schemes out there. Andy, do you just want to kind of give a brief overview of what the alternatives that specifiers might see are?
Yeah, the compliance certificates could be issued. There's three main operators, Kiwa, who are very good to come onto the panel today. There's also NSF, who run a Regulation 4 scheme as well, that has its own advantages. And there's also the RAS compliance scheme, which is probably the most recognised one, but it's important to stress that it's not the only one. People do talk about RAS as being the regulation, but it's important to understand that Regulation 4 that we've just talked about is really the element that must be complied with to satisfy the water regulators. I think the other thing to point out, just on the sort of legality of it, is this goes all the way up to DEFRA in the government. So DEFRA actually control the water regulations, and the dissemination is through the many water companies throughout the UK, and they actually enforce the regulations. So when we talk about compliance to a scheme, it's actually demonstrating to those regulators, who are the water companies, for want of a better phrase, so your Severn Trents, Thames Water, etc., just to name a couple, but they want to see these compliance certificates because that tells them that Regulation 4 has been satisfied.
So just to kind of reiterate that point, the different actors in this, we've got DEFRA as the regulator, the water industry as the enforcers who are going to be checking things, and what are those enforcers going to be looking for? David, you're in regular dialogue with the water industry. What are they going to be looking for when they go out and visit a new installation?
Well, ultimately, they're going to be looking at the complete installation. We've got to remember these water regulations are there to protect public health. That's the primary focus, and by doing that, they are safeguarding the water supply, right? And that's their focus. So they want to be looking at all the different materials, components, fittings, anything water related. Those water enforcement officers from your local water supplier will be looking at what fittings are being installed. Now, of course, there are many materials out there that we all know. Your copper pipes, for example, they will be installed. But then we have these assembled products that these guys on the panel produce. And, the water companies are looking at those products, and they want to be able to see that those products have already been approved, are already been tested and certified, and therefore are fit to go on the water supply. And then comes back into what Randy mentioned earlier, is that Regulation 4.1 also asks about the installation is correct. So the water companies are looking at for two aspects, really. One, that the product is compliant, right? And they can do that by having a certificate. And secondly, it's been installed correctly. And that's what water company is going to be looking at. At Kiwa, we have an online list of all these products. So the water company has a direct link into our online list of certified products. So they can see clearly what has been tested. They can see clearly what the materials are made from, and that they are compliant with the UK requirements. It's a very good tool that the water companies are using. We can see the hits that are coming onto the website. It's a very popular access tool to see what products out there are compliant.
Recently, BMA, sorry, there's a bit of feedback which make it quite difficult to concentrate. Recently, BMA wrote to all of the water undertakers and asked them what you're going to be looking for when you're out on inspections. And you know, we had a really positive response from our colleagues in the water industry, saying that they'd be happy for the evidence of compliance with regulation 4, whether that be quite detailed documentary test evidence direct from the manufacturer, or equally one of the approval schemes, Kiwa was mentioned, along with NSF and RAS as well. But that's what they're looking for.
Sorry, Tom, I think we have to sort of put ourselves in the position of the water companies and these inspectors in the field. If they don't see anything and they can't attach some kind of positive evidence to a product that they're faced with, what's their next steps, really? If they can't sign off an installation, they're going to be looking to perhaps even ask the installer to withdraw that product from the installation. So we have to put ourselves in the position of those water company enforcers. They are the guys on the front line having to look for positively approved and certified products.
So let's open this conversation up a little now. We've got several manufacturers on the call today. From your conversations with customers, whether that be specifiers or perhaps even retailers, what are the common myths that we need to address around compliance and the water regulations? Does anyone want to have a first off on that? I can see a wry smile from you, Alex. I'm going to bring you in.
I think one of them probably is one we've already mentioned today, is that we're complying to a regulation, not a particular testing body. I think there is that. So I think opening that out and actually making it clear that there are a number of different avenues you can go through to demonstrate compliance. I think that's a really important one to be able to let specifiers know about. I think the other one that I think the discussion we've already had today is quite helpful around, I think, is really trying to let specifiers understand what the need for compliance is. I think, we do certainly see, the availability of products on the marketplace at the, now is more than it ever was before. And there are a lot of products that are available which don't comply. That are sort of imported products, cheap products that are put into the marketplace with relatively little oversight in terms of what they comply with and their quality, and that can create significant challenges. I think our water regulations have been written and designed around the water conditions that we find within the UK, with different pressures, hard water, etc., all these different eventualities, which mean that products that aren't designed and tested in accordance with those won't perform as they should. So I think the two things for me are being able to demonstrate compliance through a number of different avenues, and also that it doesn't really matter and any old product will do. Actually understanding that the regulations and what's behind it and the rigor and testing behind it is actually really important, because it allows you to guarantee that the product that you're specifying will actually perform as it should.
Siggy, you've been uncharacteristically quiet up to now. What sort of things do you hear from customers that sometimes make you raise your eyebrows?
I think there's a lot of confusion at this moment in time. What's happened over the last year or two has left people within the industry bemused. The supply chain has therefore become more complex. They're unsure about which is absolutely the law as it should be. they've relied upon the inference, and certainly they've felt that their reliance upon RAS as the de facto rubber stamp of yes, that works, has been shaken somewhat to the point that they're now very, very unsure about what the future looks like. And because the future to them is what they're building for, they're trying to get some confidence about the products that they get from whichever manufacturer. So it's a difficult thing where people, especially further down the supply chain, just want to know, yeah, it's going to fit. We haven't got to rip it out. We haven't got to change it off, and be confident that whatever they do, they're going to fit a product that's going to work, and give the users of our water system confidence the water that comes out of it is going to end up being safe. And that safety is what all of the manufacturers are looking for. We're all trying to do the same thing. We're not trying to make it difficult, but at the moment, the recent few months have been confusing, to say the least. So that's the challenge that we see ourselves, because the alternative is that if we're not careful, we will be driven down a route of potentially going back to an awful lot more tanks in the roofs of houses, and different supply side of bringing water into the building and making sure that works. Do we want to go back that way? I don't know. I don't know all the answers by a long way, but I do know there's more confusion in the market than we really want.
So do you think we can kind of move past some of that confusion by getting the different, demystifying some of the different routes to demonstrating compliance, and raising awareness to brands like the Kiwa UK Reg 4 scheme, for instance? Steph, I saw you kind of nodding through various remarks from both Alex and Siggy then. Have you got any thoughts here?
Well, I think we've probably all touched on the same point, which some of the biggest confusion comes from, customers demanding one particular scheme and certification, with a lack of understanding that actually there is an equal equivalent to, all three of the certification schemes that we've discussed. I think that's probably evolving slightly, but that's historically definitely been one of the biggest challenges I've seen is, just understanding about those differences, that when you supply, as an example, the Kiwa UK certificate, that it is showing an equal or equivalent compliance level. So that's definitely been one of the key things. I think the other thing is that, as Andy said to start off this discussion, the regulations were written in 1999, should I specify? And, obviously, things have moved and evolved, and products have moved and evolved. I think Alex just slightly touched on this with his comments, is that, as a manufacturer, we're trying to be at the forefront of what we do in terms of regulations that change and standards as they evolve. And obviously, therefore, the products start to change and evolve as well. But the regulations actually are still written, from 1999. So there are discussions and queries about innovations that, there's sort of a gap, I suppose, and it's an interpretation and a discussion that we find we end up having with customers or with, the likes of Kiwa, NSF and RAS on the products themselves, and actually how they fit in with the regulations. So that's probably a bit of a gap area that causes a bit of the discussion point.
Touching on Sorry, go ahead, Alex.
I'd definitely just back up Stephanie in terms of what she's saying there is, I think that encouraging innovation, so encouraging manufacturers to look at products which are innovative and using new technologies, and then being able to encourage specifiers to adopt them, is something sometimes challenging with a regulatory network that, as Stephanie described, is quite old, and doesn't have that sort of future intent. If you look at something like the clear direction that something like the Future Home Standard around energy saving that's been given to map that out to 2050 for developers, I'm not sure the same consideration has been put on the water use side in terms of really mapping that through, so that manufacturers can sit there and say, okay, we're designing for a net zero carbon future, but and a water reduction target use, we're going to have to put in different kinds of innovation in order to meet that currently the regulatory framework doesn't quite allow for. And I think that's definitely one of the challenges that we've got.
Yeah, just to touch on some of those points, and I think the key one is, like I said, within my position as business development and being upfront, speaking with customers about new projects, testing, certification. Going back to the original question as well, Tom, about the myths, we are still seeing that, like I said, specifiers, contractors are still stating that the product needs to be RAS approved. And like I said, I explain this almost every day to customers about what other options there are. But yeah, certainly that is kind of still a myth that a product needs to be RAS approved.
Yeah, thanks, John. I mean, before this session, we actually did some work with friends at Barber ABI around the wording in specifications in the water regs, and there's not too much in specification documents. Now, I posed this question to you last week, Craig, that I'll pose to you again. Where is it that you see some of the myths coming to the fore in your conversations with specifiers? Craig?
Well, yeah, we see a lot of it a lot further down the supply chain, to be honest. It almost comes to a point where the installer has heard about certification schemes, and it's kind of ties into the sort of myth element that we were talking about just a second ago, where a certain certification scheme is always asked for. And I think it's got to be the clear message that that certification scheme isn't the regulatory scheme. It is just a way of demonstrating compliance. And I think that's the key point here, is that the regulations are separate from demonstrating compliance. And there are multiple ways of demonstrating compliance to ensure that the products that us as responsible manufacturers put out into the marketplace are safe and fit for purpose. And I think as long as in specifications, it's clear that it meets those regulations, no matter how you demonstrate compliance to it, I think that will make things a lot clearer and a lot easier.
So we need kind of confidence in what's needed throughout the whole supply chain, including specifiers, to be able to push back and challenge some of their stakeholders where needed. That, you know, there are multiple ways of demonstrating compliance. If I could just ask you to imagine a future where we've kind of busted all of the myths, and that there's kind of a very kind of clear path where people can go to keyword, to NSF, to RAS, the multiple different approval schemes, and they're all very, very widely accepted in the marketplace. What are the implications for specifiers in terms of choice and the innovations that they're going to see coming to market? Alex, can I ask you to comment on that one?
I think it just hopefully allow, well, I think first of all, be really clear what products do actually comply, and it will now allow that selection of products in the first place to be more straightforward, and I think eliminate some of the confusion that Siggy was talking about. And I think on the other side of it, I think if there's a sort of a clearer direction on where the water regulations are going, that will allow greater innovation, I think hopefully what we'll see is a bit more creativity in the marketplace, and I think we'll see more innovative products coming to market and enabling specifiers to meet the needs of their customers in different ways, rather than a kind of identikit approach, which I think sort of drives a bit of a commoditization within the marketplace. I think if we can have greater choice and more innovation and people trying to achieve specifications in different ways, I think that only ends up being better for the end user and the end consumer.
So greater choice, greater diversity, and just more confidence that the products will comply. Yeah,
I think as well it will, you know, benefit the installer as well, I think, in that respect, because I think one of the other factors you get with products which don't necessarily comply with the regulations is often they don't install in the same ways, or there's idiosyncrasies with the installation, and that can make it more challenging as well at the install phase as well as the in-use phase.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Anyone else, any kind of thoughts on the sunlit uplands when we've kind of got very clear communication of what compliance looks like around the water regs? David?
Well, it may sound quite selfish, really, but I see a world where people are asking for a Reg 4 certificate, and as Kiwa, we can compete in that market. And we talk about myths. One of the one things that we always see is what's mandatory, right? Compliance is mandatory. So a third-party certification system isn't, right? Perhaps I would like to see that involved. Right, but the other thing I would like to see is about enforcement of these regulations. We haven't touched on it. It's the enforcement is done at point of installation, right? I would like to see enforcement done perhaps at point of sale, right? So everybody is getting educated in a better way, and the new normal we talk about, right, is talking about, is your product fit for sale, right? And does it have the correct certification mark, a Reg 4 mark? Of course, I want to see Kiwa UK Reg 4 mark on everything, but it's all about education, and we've got to be better from sort of top to toe. I hear recently that I know some young guy doing a plumbing qualification level 2, and his spec sheet was the RAS are the approval people in the plumbing industry. Well, we got to change that vocabulary, right? Even not just the specifiers, right back to the installers and the qualified plumbers. So, yeah, the future where Kiwa UK is specified, it doesn't have to be Kiwa UK, just a Reg 4 specified, and then it encompasses alternatives.
David, you preempted the question that we've had from an audience member, Peter, who's asked just that: should we push for a change in the law so that compliance applies at point of sale and not the point of install? Anyone else on the panel have any views on that question?
I would just say that really, as a manufacturer, I think we can all agree, sat on this panel, that we would always look to have our products compliant from the point of view of when they are sold, in all honesty. But we know that that's not the legal requirement, and therefore that not every manufacturer thinks that, you know, the way we do. So I definitely think that, you know, with any reputable manufacturer who is selling quality goods and therefore wants to show the third-party compliance, you're going to have that in place as standard, because I know we do. But at the same time, yeah, until it is made mandatory, a legal requirement, then obviously that's, you know, there are products on the market that don't comply with that. I think probably going back to what David said, though, education, and it touches on what Jonathan said earlier, education is key. And if you think about all of the product literature, technical information on water regulations, on specific products that has been put out through many, many years, I have to say that I can read many documents on the internet or historical information on products where, you know, it is RAS that's quoted. It's not regulation 4, it is one specific scheme. And that does therefore get embedded in people's minds. And it is only through, you know, having discussions like this one today, or through talking to people who are involved with education directly through apprenticeships and things like that, that will slowly start to evolve and people will become more aware. You know, I think it's very different for manufacturers because we're living and breathing approvals daily. You know, we're all in contact with test houses. We're all having discussions about with trade associations like the BMA about what's changing, what's evolving, what's coming through. So we're very much understanding of it, but I think it's getting that same sort of understanding out to the wider audience that becomes the challenge. And
specifiers have got a key role in conveying that message as well, haven't they? And how do they go about doing it, would you say?
I suppose part of it becomes our responsibility to make sure that's relayed. And also then that, you know, Really, I would guess it's not going to be a very quick change, but the more that everybody individually starts to talk about this, the quicker the word will obviously roll out, and that I think people can understand how this needs to change to help everybody, and particularly going back to the thinking for the future in innovation. We want to make sure that we're not having this same discussion in a few years' time, that actually this does change and the situation for us all improves. That Reg 4 is just the the standard that we're all looking to achieve.
Thanks, Steph. Andy, I can see you've indicated, I'm going to bring you in a moment, but I want to come to Siggy first, because I kind of noticed you giving a smile then when Steph was talking about almost evolution versus revolution around this. How quickly do you think we can do that education piece?
It's going to take us a while. And the challenge is that with an established player, which I feel is probably viewed as the market rate, RAS has got some responsibility. And it's really a question then of saying, if we've got equivalence between the different certification systems, how we prove it. And the challenge I've always had, especially over the last few months, is that there's a link directly to the water boards through into RAS, which has always made it an imbalance. And that imbalance has not sat well with me. And this isn't against RAS per se, because this isn't just about RAS. This is about how we move forward, because we're all interested in trying to achieve the same thing. How we do it, that's what we're kind of here to start that discussion and try and move forward together. As manufacturers, we just want to end up having confidence of what we've got to develop, because product development is not something that just happens overnight. It takes us a while, a year, sometimes more, to get products. And every time regulations change or things happen within the marketplace and the market rate shifts, then it makes it more difficult for manufacturers to provide products that actually comply. And nobody really wants that, because they want to know the product that we put in this week is going to continue to be suitable for some time into the future. So it's a real challenge there in terms of where we're moving forward.
In the run up to this discussion, I had a couple of chats with people within the water industry who are very supportive of what we're trying to do by having this discussion and kind of improving the awareness of the water fittings regulations among the kind of wider construction community. So there is an enthusiasm and a willingness to partake in this. And they also want to see a plurality in the different approvals schemes and routes to demonstrate compliance, because they don't want any bottlenecks either. So I think there's definitely some scope for collaboration on that. Andy?
Yeah, just adding to both points that Steph and Siggy made, just to say that the education we keep we need to emphasize that the education is throughout the chain, and it's quite a complicated supply chain and a lot of contracts, and we need to make sure that everybody gets the message that Regulation 4 is key. And I think sometimes in that chain that you've got maybe your installer who's not quite sure, and there is a go-to. So the education and just making sure that we start changing the language, as David said, into Regulation 4 for all those people involved in that chain. And the other point I just wanted to make, that and the point there is that the specifiers really, the specifiers aren't the only people that we're targeting this session at. It's throughout, and the BMA are working really hard to get that message throughout that chain, even all the way up into DEFRA, so that the language is correct. And the other point I just wanted to make that we just need to touch on is the installation is as important as the mechanics of the actual fitting. And just to make the point that manufacturers really want their products installed by somebody who's competent, and there are schemes throughout the UK that have qualified plumbers that are registered and able to understand these things as well. So you've just got to be careful in that supply chain that we hear a lot from manufacturers where a product is switched because of a lack of understanding that a Regulation 4 certificate issued by Kiewit is of equal importance to RAS. And it's just that ignorance that we need to make sure that people understand that they are equivalent. It's not one better than the other. It's equivalent, and it's got to be recognized throughout the whole chain. So we've got a real job and a real task ahead of us.
Thanks, Andy. I mean, the title of this session is The Secret to Keeping Your Water Supply Safe. And, you know, understandably, given our panel, we focused a lot on products and ensuring that there's an approval there so that you can verify that a product is compliant. But you're spot on, Andy, that it requires correct installation as well. And you know, water safe is one of the schemes which I'm sure you're inferring in your remarks there. You know, competence is a key thing, and certainly that's another one of our campaign points through our colleagues at NHIC and elsewhere.
And just to add the accountability, you know, that installers and specifiers need to understand that if the product isn't correct to Regulation 4, then it's an offence to actually install that product. So you must check that product is compliant. And that's why our manufacturers spend a lot of money making sure that product is compliant.
Craig, you're nodding, and I was actually going to come to you next to ask the question, you know, why as a credible manufacturer is demonstrating compliant something you invest so heavily in?
Well, we've been in the market for 35 years, and I think if you're successful for that amount of time, you're doing the right thing. And I think what we do, and all the other manufacturers on the panel do the same, is, and Andy just alluded to it, you spend a lot of the product development time putting a lot of work in specifying the right materials, testing those materials, making sure they're correct and fit for purpose, so that A, you're trying to bring something new to the market, but B, it still meets the regulations that are there in front of us back from 1999. And it does take up a big chunk of it, but it's well worth it, because then it gives the end user, specifier, the installer and the end user, that safe feeling that the product is A, going to be able to be installed correctly, and then B, it can then be safe to use.
Alex, as another manufacturer, I know how much Myra Showers put into the demonstration of compliance. Do you kind of concur with everything that Craig said there? Anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's about kind of doing the right thing. I think trying to make sure you're manufacturing safe products that are fit for purpose for the market. But I think there's also an aspect of brand quality as well. I think, as I alluded to previously, I think there are lots of products in the market which don't comply. So I think you're trying to differentiate yourself by actually, I guess, holding yourself to a higher standard and kind of demonstrating that through quality. But I think also, hopefully just making it easier for specifiers to choose as well. I think if you are getting your products tested and investing and demonstrating compliance, these different demonstrating compliance, then if the specifier is looking for products that comply, yours are one of those products. So just making it easier for them to choose as well. So I think there's a couple of different aspects to it, but I think it is a hugely important part of our business. It's fundamental, and I think as well to the point Siggy made around, it's not fast. It's not something that's quick. And it's something you have to consider very early on in the product development process as well, because it's really important, down to the materials that you're using during manufacturing, how the product's designed, etc. You're doing that right up front. So it's a really important consideration right the way through the process.
Siggy. Oh, I'm afraid you got to put a pound in the jar because it appears you're muted.
Yeah, I shall put the microphone back on. I think it's just worth remembering that we've got a lot of fantastic manufacturers in the UK, some brilliant companies, fantastic people, but there's a large amount of product that has come in. And the great difficulty is that when we look at other regulations like EN 14055, the UK is unique insofar as it's got a class 2 requirement, and 14055 class 2 has got 2 or 3 extra bits and pieces which no one else in Europe has got. So there's a challenge for a lot of importers to bring products in, such as ourselves, to ensure they're to regulations, because the rest of the world doesn't have some of the high standards that we might have in the UK. And as I said, it's about trying to look forward, not moving backwards towards maybe some of the Victorian standards. In the Victorian times, they were the best systems in the world. Everyone looked at the UK and thought, that's what we aspire to. We need to do the same thing again. But I don't want to end up ignoring some of the advances in the technologies that are available to us because of product development over the last 20 odd years. Because the regulations were written in 99, and that was based upon testing and work done way before that. So if we're going to change those regulations, make sure they're more suitable for the future, then let's explore that. Let's not just throw that out and try and look only to the past for the answers that we've got to get.
I think, we did have a short discussion on whether or not we should tackle prospective changes to regulation as part of this panel debate. I think that's very definitely a discussion for another day.
Yeah.
But no, nevertheless, what is it that specifiers can do? What's the top thing that they can do to make sure that they're keeping their water supply safe? And perhaps go around the whole panel on this one as a kind of a bit of a mop-up exercise. What's the thing that they should put at the top of their list? David, I'll start with you.
It's good. It's just got to be, is the product third-party certified? And I'll speak on behalf of the others as well. The NSF Reg 4 system, the RAS system has been around for a long time, and our Kiwi UK system. It's not a legal requirement. You have it. You have the third-party certification in place, but it is really the only way of demonstrating that that product is safe to be connected, and then be connected in the correct manner.
Okay, thanks, David. Jonathan, go straight to you.
Yeah, just to follow on really from what David said. It's not mandatory to have the approval scheme, but the easiest way really to demonstrate compliance really from specifiers, contractors, is having that certificate to show, because as soon as the water companies see that certificate, they are happy then that project is compliant. I think that is the key.
Thanks, Jonathan. Craig.
I agree wholeheartedly with David and Jonathan on that. I think having a clear generalized statement to say that it meets regulation 4 or the water regulations 1999 and a third-party certification is required upon request, I think that makes it a lot clearer and easier and doesn't monopolize the market.
Excellent. Steph, I'll come to you next. Is it in agreement with colleagues? Anything additional there?
But I just wanted to touch, and I'm possibly stealing some words from Alex from earlier, so I do apologise. But we do, as a business, we do so many things to help support the customers. Customer services, sales team out there on the ground who know through and through the products and the compliance and the reason that we jump through all these hoops when we're doing the product development. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is really, make life easier for our customer. And if we can provide them with a certificate, and then that's backed up on a website to show that it's third-party compliant, then that is a simple way for us to show that compliance and give that assurance to our customers. So it's really just one more thing that we can provide to them as a service to say, you can be assured that our product, once that you've obtained it, is going to be fit for purpose and simple and easy to install. So from that perspective, I think it just gives them that assurance from the outset.
Alex, we'll come to you now.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what everyone's already said. I think potentially the bit I would only just add to it as well. I think from a specifier's point of view, I think the onus isn't just on them, and I think this is where manufacturers can help as well. Is following that specification through to the point of install. I think we already talked about should compliance be at point of install or point of sale, but at the moment it's at point of install. And I think one of the challenges obviously is down that chain, the specification being broken or someone putting in something else that they believe to be an equivalent but potentially isn't, and isn't something that's certified. So I think within that sort of specification piece as well, I think is understanding that the risk of that and what you can do to prevent that from happening. And I think again that's where a manufacturer who has that capability and support and is able to kind of follow that specification through all the way down that chain and provide support the whole way down that chain, can really make a difference. Thanks, Alex. Siggy.
Yeah, very much the same as everyone else has said, to be honest with you. It's a need for everybody involved. People want to have confidence, whatever they do, and make sure when they get to the end of it, nobody's going to get hurt. So as David already probably knows, we've got a whole range of new products going through the guys over in Holland being tested at this moment in time. So yeah, we're supportive of this, and it's important that we end up giving the right products to the right people at the right place. So yeah, completely agree.
And just to finish what I hope is a chorus of agreement, Andy, bring you in next. What's the one thing that our audience today can do to make sure that they keep their water supply safe?
I think to emphasise everybody's point, make sure that the products used in the supply chain are Regulation 4 throughout that chain. So the specifier is the start, but to make sure that that's all the way through the supply chain. And even up to the installer, the installer, even they need to understand that, and we see so many products that are in the market, maybe not carrying those certificates, so avoid those products.
Thanks, Andy. So, I mean, incredibly, we've already had over 50 minutes of discussion, so we're having to wrap up this conversation now. I'm just going to ask each of the manufacturers on the call. BMA has placed product compliance at the top of its agenda as one of its 2 strategic priorities, along with sustainability. Can you kind of summarize it in your own words why BMA and you as members place such emphasis and care so deeply about these issues? Does anyone want to go first? Alex, was that a finger up in the air there?
Just going to press mute or unmute rather. Yeah, I think from our perspective, I think it's a sort of key part of our brand identity. I think that commitment to quality, that commitment to performance, commitment to safety. I think all of those kind of things that are fundamental if you're providing products into this part of the market. So I think from our point of view, it's absolutely critical and fundamental to what we do. I think, as I alluded to on top of that, I think if part of your brand as well is about innovation, bringing new products to market and trying to lead in that space, I think a really core understanding of the regulations is required as well, to know how to incorporate them into the design of new products. So I think that's why it's something that's so important to us, and it's something that we do engage on and we want to continue to engage on.
Steph, any thoughts?
Yeah, very similar, but we work with various different customers, whether that's through trade specification or the OEM, and each have slightly different requirements, but ultimately each of those different divisions want to show compliance to the water regulations. So Reg 4 just helps us to do that, and as I said before, if we can give that assurance, then by way of a certification, then that just you know, is making our customers' lives easier. So
thanks, Steph. Craig?
Yeah, it's a lot of the points picked up from Alex and Steph really is just making sure that when we bring a product to market, it's at the pretty much at the top of our agenda to make sure that when we do design a product, it's with compliance in mind and making sure that it meets those regulations to ensure that our end users have the confidence that it's safe and can be installed correctly.
And last but not least on this particular question, Siggy, I mean, we've had lengthy discussions about various aspects of compliance of late, which we won't go into now, but you know, it's something that you know you seek clarity on as a manufacturer, but also that you know is part of your messaging to customers, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we had a conference recently with our company over in Germany, and it's really, really clear that any product that is not currently compliant because it's to a European specification, we immediately jump on it, and we have long discussions with our friends in Germany about making sure that they put the compliance issues straight to bed. And we want to have all of our products not just compliant, we want clarity with regards to what the law is. We want to make sure that any customer that comes to us has nothing but an excellent experience, and compliance is a part of that. So making sure that the products work and that they are within the law and being able to prove that through a compliance document is within our DNA. And therefore, it takes some time sometimes for importers to get products to the right spec, and the UK's got a bit of a benefit there. But there's no question that's exactly what we do, and it's a stated aim of the company that we make sure that our factories produce the products to the spec. So yeah, no question about that. That's where we're going.
Thanks, Iggy. I've given each of the manufacturers a chance to comment here. So in the interest of fairness to Kiwa as an approvals house, bring you in, David, to give our final word before I wrap up the session.
Well, it is interesting to hear what the manufacturers are saying there. As a certification body, we also have a responsibility here to provide our product as a certificate. And what we are trying to do internally within Kiwa, because we have labs and certification schemes throughout Europe, we are also trying internally to sort of bridge the gap between the several different certification schemes. So when a manufacturer like Ziggy's producers there in Germany are talking with our Dutch colleagues, is that our UK office is immediately engaged as well, so we can bridge the gap. I think that's quite important from a certification point of view, is that we are also adapting to the needs of the market.
Thanks, David. Do you want to chip in as well there, Jonathan? Or
yeah, I think that's the key point what David has just touched on, really. Like I said, with our scheme, we are trying to sort of take a really flexible approach and support manufacturers from the start. And like I said, with we being situated and offering other schemes across Europe, and a lot of the manufacturers we work with for the UK, we also work within Europe. Our scheme, the way it is set up, is to support manufacturers in that way, where we can sort of, in some cases, transfer the testing and results that have already been done in Europe to create a UK certificate. And manufacturers are really starting to see the advantage of that from a cost and time saving point of view.
thanks, Jonathan. I just had a comment coming on the chat, which I think is an absolutely brilliant way to sum up the discussion and to finish the call today. That's Mick says a wholesome water supply is key to the nation's health, and we have a responsibility to ensure that no product or installation contaminates its supply. I think we're all in agreement of that, and it's a good way to draw a line under the session. Thank you to each one of the panelists. Thanks to Elemental for organising today's session, and most of all, thanks to everybody that's viewed this and that views back on the on-demand service as well. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.